Walk it off! Stop being a baby! My father yelled these words as I lay motionless on the cold concrete of his patio. My brother stood above me, smirking, phone in hand, while my mother accused me of ruining the birthday vibe. But when the paramedic saw I could not move my legs, she did not just load me onto the stretcher. She immediately signaled her partner to call for police backup, because what the MRI would reveal an hour later was not an accident. It was a crime. Before I tell you how my family turned a birthday party into a felony investigation, let me know where you are watching from. In the comments, hit like and subscribe. If you have ever been the scapegoat in a toxic family, my name is Ethan, and at 26 years old, I thought I had escaped the toxic gravitational pull of my family. I worked as a data analyst in Chicago, kept my finances private, and visited my parents' sprawling Evanston estate only when absolutely necessary. Last Saturday was one of those days. It was my brother Kyle's 29th birthday. Kyle was the golden child, a title he held despite being unemployed and spending his days chasing internet fame with prank videos that rarely got more than a few hundred views. My parents, Richard and Linda, supported him entirely, claiming he was just finding his creative voice while dismissing my career as boring desk work. The backyard was set up for a content creation extravaganza. There were lights, speakers, and a homemade platform built on the second-floor balcony overlooking the pool deck. Kyle had been live streaming for an hour, drinking beer and performing minor stunts for his small audience. Around 4 in the afternoon, he cornered me, the camera already recording. He announced to his followers that it was time for the ultimate trust fall challenge. He wanted me to stand on the ledge of the balcony, blindfolded, and fall backward onto a stack of foam gymnastics mats he had set up on the concrete below. I immediately refused. Looking at the drop, it was at least 10 feet and 10. The mats looked old and compressed. I told him, "No way, Kyle. That is not safe. Find someone else." My father. Richard looked up from his scotch and scowled. He told me to stop being such a coward and that I was always ruining Kyle's fun. My mother Linda chimed in from the lounge chair, saying it was just a video and asking why I had to be so difficult on my brother's birthday. The pressure was suffocating. The guests were watching. My parents were glaring, and Kyle was taunting me with the camera lens right in my face just to get it over with and leave. I finally agreed. I climbed the ladder to the balcony, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear Kyle down below hyping up the stream, telling everyone this was going to be epic. I stood on the edge and let Kyle tie a bandana around my eyes. The darkness made the drop feel infinite. Take a deep breath. "Ethan, just fall back and we catch you." Kyle yelled, his voice thick with excitement and what I thought was brotherly reassurance. I counted to 3 in my head. I stiffened my body and I leaned back into the void. Gravity took over instantly. The wind rushed past my ears, and for a split second, I waited for the soft impact of the foam mats. Instead, there was a sickening crack. My lower back slammed directly onto the hard, unforgiving concrete. The sound was like a dry branch snapping under a heavy boot, but louder. Much louder. The air left my lungs in a violent whoosh, and my vision behind the blindfold exploded into white light. Then darkness. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then I heard Kyle laughing. It was a deep belly laugh, loud and hysterical. "Pranked," he screamed. "Look at his face. Oh my God, that was perfect." I tried to inhale, but my chest felt paralyzed. I tried to roll over to push myself up, and that was when the true horror set in. I could not feel my legs. I sent the command from my brain to my toes to wiggle, to move, to do anything. But there was nothing, just a terrifying, empty silence below my waist. I ripped the blindfold off with trembling hands, my vision swimming. My father was standing over me, shaking his head. "Get up. Ethan, stop acting," he said, his voice dripping with annoyance. "You are making a scene. Get up." I looked down. The foam mats were gone. They were stacked 10 feet away. Directly beneath me was just a thin blue plastic tarp covering the concrete. Kyle had pulled the mats away at the last second for the video. I cannot feel my legs. I wheezed, the panic rising in my throat as I clawed at my thighs, feeling the fabric of my jeans with my hands, but feeling nothing on my skin below. My father actually kicked my boot, lightly, nudging it. "Stop it. Seriously, you are embarrassing your mother. Get up and walk it off. You are fine." My mother sighed loudly from the patio table, asking if we could please cut the drama so she could bring out the cake. That was when the back door flew open and Nia rushed out. Nia is Kyle's wife, a 28-year-old ER nurse who is the only person in this house with a conscience. She gotten home from a 12-hour shift and was still in her scrubs. She took one look at me, lying twisted on the tarp, and dropped her bag. She sprinted across the yard, pushing my father aside. "Don't move him!" she screamed, her voice sharp with professional authority. "Do not touch him!" She knelt beside me, her hands hovering over my spine, but not touching her eyes, scanning my pupil response. "Ethan, can you hear me?" "Squeeze my hand." I squeezed her hand as hard as I could. "Good," she said. "Now wiggle your left toe." I stared at my left boot, willing it to move, praying for even a twitch. Nothing happened. Nia's face went pale. She looked up at Kyle, who was still filming, and shouted, "Stop recording, you idiot! Call 911. Now. He is not moving his legs." Kyle rolled his eyes and kept the phone pointed at me. "Relax, babe, he is just in shock. He is fine, look. There is no blood. It is just a prank." Nia stood up and slapped the phone out of his hand, the screen shattering on the patio. "Call 911 or I will," she hissed with a ferocity I had never seen before. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. "You broke his phone." "Nia, that was the new iPhone." Nia ignored her and pulled out her own phone, dialing with shaking hands, requesting an ambulance for a potential spinal cord injury. While she was on the line, my father leaned down and hissed at me, "If you ruin this party with an ambulance bill, you are paying for it yourself. Ethan, this is ridiculous acting." The next 10 minutes were a blur of agony and fear. I lay staring at the sky, watching the clouds move, unable to feel the cold concrete beneath my hips. The pain in my back was beginning to sharpen, changing from a dull shock to a searing hot knife twisting in my spine. The sirens grew louder and soon paramedics were rushing through the side gate. The lead paramedic, a woman with sharp eyes, assessed the situation. Immediately, she saw me lying on the tarp. She saw the stack of mats 10 feet away, and she saw my family standing around holding drinks. Looking annoyed rather than concerned, she knelt beside Nia, who was rattling off my vitals and the mechanism of injury fall from approximately 12 feet direct impact to lumbar spine loss of sensation and motor function in lower extremities. The paramedic looked at the balcony, then down at the tarp. She touched my leg. "Can you feel this, sir?" "No," I whispered, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. She looked at my father. "What happened here?" "He fell." My father lied instantly. "Just slipped off the balcony. Clumsy kid. Always has been." The paramedic narrowed her eyes. She looked at the position of my body, then at the mats pushed to the side. She leaned in close to her partner and whispered something I could not hear, but I saw her partner nod and reach for his radio, requesting police backup for a suspicious injury report. They collared my neck and prepared the backboard. The movement sent bolts of lightning through my nervous system, and I screamed a raw animal sound that finally seemed to pierce my mother's indifference. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Linda said, turning away. "He is so dramatic, he always has to be the center of attention." As they lifted me onto the gurney, Naya tried to climb into the back of the ambulance with me. "Wait, I am going," she said. But Kyle grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Where do you think you are going? The party is not over. People are still here. You are not leaving me to deal with the guests alone. Let him go, he is a big boy." Naya looked at me, her eyes full of tears and conflict. Then she looked at Kyle's grip on her arm. "Go," I mouthed to her. "Just let me go. I did not want them there. I did not want their fake concern or their judgment. I just wanted to be away from that house. The paramedic looked at Kyle holding Naya back and her jaw tightened. We are leaving now, she said, slamming the ambulance doors shut. The last thing I saw before the darkness of the ambulance enclosed me was my father checking his watch and my brother picking up his shattered phone, checking to see if the video had saved. Inside the ambulance, the siren wailed a lonely sound against the suburban quiet. I lay strapped down, unable to move my lower body, the pain radiating in waves. The paramedic started an IV and looked down at me with genuine pity in her eyes. "You are safe now," she said softly. "We are going to take care of you. Whatever happened back there, it is over." But as I stared at the ceiling of the speeding ambulance, I knew it was not over. It was just beginning. The physical pain was excruciating, but the realization that my brother had crippled me for a TikTok video and my parents were more concerned about the party than my paralysis hurt far worse. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, praying that when I woke up I would be able to feel my toes, but deep down in the numbness of my legs, I knew my life had just changed forever. The magnetic resonance imaging machine was a coffin of noise and claustrophobia, clanging like a sledgehammer against a metal sheet, rhythmically pounding into my skull. Thumping against the raw, terrified beat of my own heart lay perfectly still. The technician had said over the intercom, as if I had a choice, I was strapped down, my head immobilized in a cage, my lower body a dead weight that felt like it belonged to a mannequin rather than a human being. The cold air of the hospital room had seeped into my bones, but inside the tube the air was stale and thick with the metallic taste of magnets and fear. Every bang of the machine triggered a memory, a flash of the past that I had tried so hard to bury deep in the recesses of my mind. The rhythmic thumping sounded just like the basketball Kyle used to bounce off my head when we were kids. He would corner me in the driveway, dribbling the ball harder and harder, slamming it into my chest, my shoulders, my face, while my father watched from the garage polishing his golf clubs. Whenever I cried out, my father would shout, "Don't be so soft, Ethan. It is just a game, toughen up, or the world will eat you alive." The machine word changing pitch to a high screaming whine that sounded like the time Kyle locked me in the pool filter shed for 3 hours when I was 9. It was dark and smelled of chlorine and spiders, and no matter how hard I screamed and banged on the metal door, nobody came. When Kyle finally let me out, he was laughing, holding his stomach while I gasped for air. My mother had been in the kitchen the whole time. She just glanced at my tear-stained face and told me to stop making up stories to get my brother in trouble, saying that Kyle was just teasing and I needed to learn to take a joke. I tried to focus on my breathing, inhale, count to 4, exhale, count to 4, but the panic was a rising tide inside my chest. I was 26 years old. I was a data analyst with a retirement fund and a life in Chicago. Yet lying in this plastic tube, I was that scared little boy again, helpless at the mercy of a brother who viewed my pain as entertainment, and parents who viewed my survival instinct as a character flaw. The scan seemed to last for eternity, dissecting me layer by layer, stripping away my skin and muscle to reveal the truth hidden in my bones. I wondered if the machine could see the emotional scars too, or just the physical ones. Finally, the noise stopped, leaving a ringing silence that was almost louder than the clamor. The table slid out of the tube and the bright fluorescent lights of the imaging suite blinded me for a moment. A nurse named Brenda, not the one from the ambulance, but an older woman with a no-nonsense face, helped slide me from the MRI table to a gurney. "Be careful with his lumbar region," she instructed the orderly, her voice sharp and professional. I tried to catch her eye to ask if anyone was in the waiting room, if my parents had followed the ambulance, if my brother had shown even a flicker of remorse. But she was busy checking the IV line in my arm and adjusting the blanket over my legs. The silence from the hallway answered my question better than she could have. I was alone. They wheeled me into a small consultation room, the walls painted a sterile, calming beige, That did nothing to calm me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the minutes of my new reality. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots, trying to distract myself from the fact that I still could not wiggle my big toe. I sent the signal down my spine over and over. Move, just move, please, move. But the line was dead. The door opened, and a tall man in a white coat entered. He had silver hair and the grave expression of a man who delivers bad news for a living. He introduced himself as Dr. Bishop, the on-call neurosurgeon. He did not waste time with small talk. He pulled up a rolling stool and sat close to the bed, holding a tablet in his hands. "Ethan, I have reviewed your scans," he said, his voice low and steady. "We have a clear picture of what is happening in your back. Unfortunately, the news is not good." I braced myself, gripping the side rails of the gurney. "Just tell me," I said, my voice raspy. "Please, just tell me the truth." Dr. Bishop turned the tablet so I could see the grayscale image of my spine. Even to my untrained eye, it looked wrong. He pointed to a section of the spinal column that looked crushed, compressed like a soda can under a boot. "You have suffered a burst fracture of the L1 vertebra." He explained. The force of the impact caused the bone to shatter outward, sending fragments into your spinal canal. This has resulted in a severe contusion or bruising of the spinal cord itself. Additionally, there is significant compression at the L2 level. Essentially, your spinal cord is being squeezed and damaged by the bone fragments. I stared at the image that represented my life, breaking in two. "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling the cold sweat of shock prickle on my forehead. "Will I walk again?" Dr. Bishop sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "It is too early to say for certain. We need to perform emergency decompression surgery immediately to remove the bone fragments and stabilize your spine with titanium rods and screws right now. I would put your chances of regaining full mobility at 50-50. If we do not operate within the next hour, those chances drop to 0. 50-50, a coin toss. My entire future, my independence, my ability to walk, to run, to live a normal life. All came down to a coin toss, because my brother wanted a viral video, because my parents wanted a party, because I had been too weak to say no and walk away. The injustice of it burned in my throat like bile. Dr. Bishop was scrolling through the images on his tablet, frowning. He zoomed in on a different area of the scan, higher up near my ribcage, and then again near my neck. He swiped back and forth, comparing the new injury with what he was seeing elsewhere on my skeleton. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing slightly behind his glasses, not with judgment, but with a sharp, clinical curiosity. "Ethan, I need to ask you. Ethan, I need to. Some questions about your medical history," he said, his tone shifting from explanatory to investigative. "Have you been in a major car accident before? Or perhaps fallen from a significant height prior to today?" "No." I shook my head, confused by the question. "Why?" The doctor turned the tablet back to me, pointing to a series of white marks on my ribs and another distinct line on my collarbone. "These are calcified fractures," he said, pointing to the ribs. "These are old breaks that healed on their own, likely years ago, and here on your clavicle. Another healed fracture, and I see signs of a past compression fracture in your thoracic spine. These injuries are consistent with significant trauma, yet I do not see any surgical hardware or records of treatment in your file." I stared at the white lines on the screen, the ghosts of my childhood suddenly visible for the first time. I remembered the ribs. That was when I was 14. Kyle had tackled me into the brick fireplace during a game of indoor football. I had trouble breathing for weeks. Every breath was a sharp stab of pain. When I told my mother, she said I was just winded and gave me an ice pack, telling me to stop whining so I could go to school. I slept in a chair for a month because lying down hurt too much. And the collarbone? That was the treehouse incident when I was 12. Kyle had shaken the ladder while I was climbing up, laughing as I screamed. I fell 10 feet, landing on my shoulder. My arm hung uselessly at my side for days. My father looked at it, moved it around until I screamed, and declared it was just a sprain. He tied my arm in a homemade sling and told me to stop being a drama queen. I looked at Dr. Bishop, and for the first time in my life, I felt a strange sense of validation. The pain had been real. It had not been in my head. I had not been a baby or a coward or dramatic. I had been broken repeatedly and forced to heal in silence. No car accidents. I whispered, my throat tight. Those are from my brother. He calls them games. My parents call them roughhousing. I never went to a doctor for them. Dr. Bishop stopped scrolling. He lowered the tablet and looked at me with the intensity that made me want to look away, but I held his gaze. He was silent for a long moment, processing what I had just said. The pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The catastrophic injury today, the history of untreated trauma, the absence of family in the waiting room during a life-altering emergency. So these previous injuries were inflicted by the same person who caused your fall today? He asked, his voice carefully neutral, but I could hear the steel underneath. Yes, I said it was a trust fall. He pulled the safety mat away at the last second. The doctor closed his eyes for a brief second, a flicker of disgust crossing his face. Then he nodded once. Sharp and decisive, he tapped something into his medical notes, typing rapidly. I watched his fingers move, documenting the history that my family had tried so hard to erase. Ethan, I'm going to prep you for... I'm going to... surgery. Now, he said, looking up. But I want you to know something. What I am seeing on these scans is not just a pattern of accidents. It is a pattern of abuse. These old fractures tell a story of sustained significant trauma that was left untreated. That is medical neglect, and given the nature of today's injury, I am legally obligated to document this thoroughly. He stood up, towering over the bed. I am going to note in your official medical record that your injuries are consistent with long-term physical abuse, and that today's incident appears to be the result of a deliberate act, not an accidental fall. This will be crucial if legal action is taken later. Legal action. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I had never sued anyone, let alone my own flesh and blood. The thought of dragging my family into court, of exposing the years of secrets, made my stomach turn. But then I looked at the MRI image again, at the shattered vertebrae. That might keep me in a wheelchair forever, I thought about. Kyle smirking with his phone. I thought about my father kicking my boot, telling me to walk it off. Do it, I said, my voice trembling but clear. Write it all down. Doctor? Dr. Bishop nodded, a look of grim respect in his eyes. We will take good care of you, Ethan. You are not alone in this anymore. I will see you in the operating room. As he walked out the door, leaving me with the hum of the monitors and the cold reality of my shattered spine, I realized that the MRI had done more than just diagnose my injury. It had provided the first tangible, undeniable proof of my reality. For 26 years, my family had gaslighted me, telling me my pain was imaginary. My suffering was performative, but the bones did not lie. The calcium deposits did not lie. My body had kept the score. And now, thanks to Dr. Bishop, the world was about to see the scorecard. The orderlies came to wheel me to the operating theater, the lights of the hallway flashing overhead, like runway markers, stripping away my old life. I closed, my eyes praying that I would wake up with feeling in my toes, but knowing that even if I did, I could never go back to who I was before I was entering that operating room, a victim. But I swore to myself that if I survived, I would leave it a witness. The surgery would fix my back, but the evidence gathered in this room would eventually break my family. The surgery lasted 6 hours. It was a blur of anesthesia and fractured time. When I finally opened my eyes, the recovery room was dimly lit. The steady beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound for a moment. I forgot everything, the pain, the betrayal, the fall. Then I tried to shift my weight, and the agony flared in my lower back, reminding me that my nightmare was real. I looked down at my legs hidden beneath the thin hospital blanket and tried to move them. Nothing, not even a twitch, just a heavy, dead sensation that made my stomach churn. A nurse noticed I was awake and came over checking my vitals with efficient, gentle hands. "You are in recovery, Ethan. The surgery went well. Dr. Bishop will be by to explain more soon," she said, her voice soft. "Just rest." I drifted in and out of sleep until voices near the door pulled me back into consciousness. "This is ridiculous. We have guests waiting at home." My father's voice, loud and impatient, cut through the quiet hum of the room. "He is fine. Look at him. He is sleeping." My mother added, her tone dismissive. I kept my eyes closed, listening. The door opened further and heavy footsteps entered the room, followed by the lighter click of heels. "Mr. and Mrs. Davis, please keep your voices down. This is a recovery area." A new voice spoke, firm and authoritative. I opened my eyes to see two uniformed police officers standing at the foot of my bed. Behind them, my parents and Kyle stood looking annoyed and inconvenienced. Naya was there too, standing apart from them, her arms crossed, her face pale and drawn. "Officer Miller, Chicago PD," the older officer said, looking from me to my family. "We are here to follow up on a report filed by the paramedics regarding a suspicious injury at your residence." Suspicious injury? My father scoffed. "It was an accident. He slipped, fell off the balcony. Clumsy kid, always has been. He had too much to drink." "That is right," Kyle chimed in, stepping forward. "He was wasted, stumbling around. Thought he could do a parkour jump or something. I told him to get down, but he wouldn't listen. Slipped right off the edge, bam." I stared at my brother, listening to the ease with which he lied. He did not even blink. He just stood there, inventing a story that made me the architect of my own destruction and him the helpless bystander. "Is that true, Ethan?" the officer asked, looking directly at me. "Were you drinking?" I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was dry as sandpaper before I could get a word out. The door swung open again and Dr. Bishop strode in. He held a clipboard in his hand and his expression was thunderous. "Officer, I am glad you are here," he said, ignoring my family completely. "I have the toxicology results from the blood draw taken upon admission." He looked at Kyle, then at my parents, his eyes cold. Ethan's blood alcohol content was 0.00. There were no drugs in his system either. He was completely sober when he arrived at this hospital. The silence in the room was deafening. Kyle's smirk faltered for a second, then returned slightly more brittle. "Well, maybe he wasn't drunk. Maybe he is just an idiot. He slipped. Okay, it happens." Dr. Bishop turned to the officer, his voice rising slightly. "I have just finished a 6-hour surgery on this man. His injuries are inconsistent with a simple slip and fall. The angle of impact, the severity of the burst fracture suggest a direct vertical drop onto a hard surface without any attempt to break the fall. It is as if he fell backward, expecting to land on something soft, not concrete." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Furthermore, I have documented evidence of multiple past fractures. Ribs, collarbone, thoracic, spine, all healed without proper medical intervention. This pattern of injury combined with the nature of today's incident suggests a history of physical trauma consistent with abuse." "Abuse!" my mother shrieked, clutching her purse. "That is a lie. We are a loving family, Ethan. Tell them we have always taken care of you." I looked at my mother. Her face flushed with indignation, not at my injury, but at the accusation against her perfect family image. I looked at my father, who was glaring at the doctor as if he were an unruly employee. I looked at Kyle, who was now avoiding eye contact, shifting his weight from foot to foot. And then I looked at Nia. She was staring at Kyle, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and realization. She knew she had been there. She had seen the mats. She had seen the tarp. She knew Ethan. The officer asked again, his voice softer this time. "Tell us what happened, Did you slip? I took a breath, the air rattling in my chest. I looked straight at Kyle. It was a trust fall, rasped my voice weak but clear. He dared me to do it for his live stream. There were mats below me. I saw them before he blindfolded me. Blindfolded! The officer's eyebrows shot up. Yes, I continued. Kyle tied a bandana over my eyes. He told me to fall back, said he would catch me, said the mats were there. Kyle interrupted, his voice high and defensive. That is a lie. He is hallucinating from the pain meds. There were no mats. He just jumped. He is crazy. Dr. Bishop stepped forward, putting himself between Kyle and my bed. The paramedic report states that a stack of foam mats was found 10 feet away from the victim. The victim was found lying on a blue tarp directly on the concrete. The tarp was positioned exactly where the mats would have been. The officer turned to Kyle. You moved the mats. No, Kyle shouted. I didn't move anything. He is lying. The doctor is lying. Everyone is lying to get me in trouble, sir. The officer said, his hand resting on his belt. Step back. We need to take a formal statement from everyone separately. My father stepped in, trying to use his executive voice. Officer. This is clearly a misunderstanding. My sons play rough. They always have. It was a game, an accident. There is no need for police involvement. We will handle this as a family. This is no longer a family matter, Mr. Davis, the officer said coldly. This is a criminal investigation into aggravated battery resulting in great bodily harm. Great bodily harm. My mother repeated, her hand going to her mouth. Is he paralyzed? Dr. Bishop looked at me, his expression softening with sympathy. Ethan has suffered severe damage to his spinal cord. We have decompressed the area, but he currently has no sensation or motor function below the waist. It is unlikely he will ever walk again without assistance. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Paralyzed. Unlikely to walk again. My mother let out a sob, but it wasn't for me. Oh God, she wailed. What will the neighbors think? This will ruin us. My father turned to me, his face red. With fury, you see what you have done. You have destroyed this family. Are you happy now? I looked at him, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had paid for my college, who had also watched me get beaten, bruised, and broken for 20 years and done nothing. I didn't do this. I said, my voice gaining strength. I didn't pull the mats away. I didn't lie to the police. I didn't leave my son on the concrete to go eat cake. My father recoiled as if I had slapped him. Officer, get them out of here, I said. I want to give my statement alone. The officer nodded, gesturing for my family to leave the room. Nia stayed behind for a moment, looking at me with tears streaming down her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but Kyle grabbed her arm and dragged her out the door, slamming it behind them. As the room cleared, leaving only me, the doctor, and the police officer, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The worst had happened. I was broken. I was paralyzed. I was alone. But the truth was finally out. The secrets were exposed, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't protecting them anymore. I looked at the officer and took a deep breath. I want to press charges, I said. I want to press charges against my brother for assault and against my parents for negligence. The officer opened his notebook, his pen poised over the paper. Start from the beginning, son, he said. Tell me everything. And I did. I told him about the childhood beatings, the locked closets, the broken bones that were called sprains. I told him about the gaslighting, the favoritism, the constant fear. I told him about the birthday party, the live stream, the pressure to jump, and finally the sensation of falling into nothingness, expecting safety, and finding only pain. As I spoke, I felt the weight of 20 years lifting off my chest. My legs might be dead, but my voice was alive, and it was louder than it had ever been. When I finished, the officer closed his notebook, his face grim. We have enough to bring him in for questioning, he said, and with the doctor's testimony and the medical records, we have a strong case for felony assault. Dr. Bishop nodded. I will make sure the full medical report is available to the district attorney. These injuries tell a story, Ethan, and it is time people listen to it. They left me to rest, but sleep was impossible. My mind was racing, replaying the look on Kyle's face when the doctor exposed his lie. The fear in my mother's eyes, the anger in my father's. The lines had been drawn, the war had begun. And even though I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to move, I knew I was the one holding the weapons. Now, I looked out the window at the city lights of Chicago, blinking in the distance. Somewhere out there, my brother was probably trying to delete the video, trying to spin the story, trying to save his own skin. But he didn't know about Nia. He didn't know what she had seen, and he didn't know that the biggest threat to his freedom wasn't the police or the doctor or even me, it was the wife he had silenced. For too long, I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't pray for my legs to move. I prayed for justice, and I knew with a cold certainty that it was coming. The morning after the police left brought a stark, terrifying clarity. The fog of anesthesia had lifted, leaving behind a raw, throbbing agony that radiated from my lower back. It felt as if my spine had been replaced with broken glass. Every breath, every shift in the bed sent shockwaves through my body. But the worst part was not the pain. It was the absence of feeling below my waist. I stared at my feet under the thin hospital sheet, willing them to move, to twitch, to acknowledge my existence. Nothing. Just a heavy dead weight that belonged to a stranger. A nurse came in to check my vitals, her face kind but guarded. She adjusted the morphine drip and told me I was doing well, but her eyes avoided mine when she checked the catheter bag. Doing well meant I was alive, it did not mean I was whole. Around 10 in the morning, the door opened. I expected Dr. Bishop or maybe the police officer returning for more details. Instead, my parents walked in. Richard and Linda looked impeccable. As always, my father in a crisp polo shirt and khakis. My mother in a floral blouse. Her hair perfectly coiffed. They did not look like parents whose son had just undergone major spinal surgery. They looked like they were stopping by on their way to a country club brunch. They pulled up chairs on either side of my bed, their expressions serious but not sad. There were no tears, no hugs, no frantic questions about my prognosis, just a heavy, expectant silence. So my father began leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "How are you feeling?" "Like my back is broken," I rasped, my voice still weak from the intubation tube. "I cannot feel my legs, Dad." He nodded as if I had just commented on the weather. "Yes," the doctor said. "There might be some temporary numbness. It will pass." "Temporary," the doctor said. 50-50 at best. And that was before he saw the extent of the damage. I looked at him, searching for some sign of fatherly concern, some crack in his armor, but his eyes were hard-focused. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday," he said, his voice lowering to a confidential murmur. "Things got a little out of hand with the police." "Out of hand," I repeated incredulously. "Kyle lied to them. You lied to them." "Kyle was scared," my mother interjected, reaching out to pat my hand, but stopping short when I flinched away. "He did not mean to hurt you, Ethan. It was a prank. Gone wrong. You know how your brother gets? He does not think things through, but he loves you. He loves me so much." He pulled the safety mat away while I was blindfolded. I said, the bitterness coating my tongue like ash. "It was an accident," my father said firmly, "and that is what we need to focus on moving forward." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it out on the tray table in front of me. It was a document typed up on his home computer I recognized, the font. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a statement," my father explained, handing me a pen. "A statement for the insurance company and for the police. It just clarifies that you were aware of the risks, that you and Kyle were playing a game, and that you misjudged the jump and fell. I stared at the paper, the words blurring before my eyes. Misjudged the jump, playing a game. It was a complete fabrication, a script written to absolve Kyle of all responsibility and paint me as the architect of my own paralysis. "You want me to sign this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It is the best way to handle this," my father said, his tone reasonable, persuasive look. "Ethan, if this goes to court, it will destroy your brother. He could go to prison for a long time over a stupid mistake. Is that what you want, to ruin his life because of an accident?" Ruin his life. I looked down at my useless legs. What about my life? "Dad, I might never walk again. And we will take care of you," my mother said quickly, her eyes wide with what looked like panic but was probably just desperation. "We will help you with the medical bills, with therapy, but we cannot do that if Kyle is in jail and your father is dealing with legal fees." My father leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. "Listen, Ethan, I have been looking into our homeowner's insurance policy. If this is ruled an accident, a tragic accident on our property, the personal liability coverage kicks in. It is a significant amount. $300,000. $300,000, the number hung in the air, shiny and seductive. That money could pay for the best rehabilitation," my father continued. "It could pay for a wheelchair, accessible apartment for you. It could give you a fresh start, and it would leave enough over to help Kyle with his debts." Kyle's debts. I repeated the pieces, finally clicking into place. This was not just about keeping Kyle out of prison. This was about money. "He owes some bad people a lot of money, Ethan," my mother whispered, tears finally welling in her eyes. "Gambling debts. If he does not pay them soon, they will hurt him. They might kill him." "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice rising. "Despite the pain, you want me to lie to the police. You want me to commit insurance fraud. You want me to say I crippled myself so you can get a payout to save Kyle from his bookie. It is not fraud. It is a solution." My father snapped, his patience fraying. "It solves everyone's problems. You get your medical care. Kyle gets a clean slate and the family stays together. Nobody goes to prison. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt," I screamed, the sound tearing at my throat. "I am hurt. Dad, look at me. I am paralyzed. My spine is shattered, and you are talking about money." "Keep your voice down," my mother hissed, glancing at the door. "People will hear you. Let them hear," I said. "Let them hear that you care more about Kyle's gambling debts than your own son's life." "Ethan, please," my mother pleaded, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Think about your brother. He has a future. He could turn this around. He just needs one more chance. You have always been the strong one, the resilient one. You can handle this." "Kyle can't. He is fragile." "Fragile." I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Kyle is 29 years old. He is a grown man who pushes his little brother off balconies for internet clout. He is not fragile. Mom, he is a monster and you made him. Don't you dare speak about your brother that way." My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We are trying to help you here. You ungrateful little shit, without this money, you are nothing. You are a cripple with no job and mountains of medical bills. Who is going to take care of you? Us? Or are you going to rot in some state facility?" The threat was naked and terrifying. They were my safety net, or so I had thought. Without them, without their financial support, I was facing a terrifyingly uncertain future, disabled, alone, and broke. But looking at them now, looking at the fear in my mother's eyes and the cold, the calculation in my father's, I realized they were not a safety net. They were a spider web. "I am not signing it," I said, pushing the paper away, my hand shaking, not from fear but from rage. "I am not lying for Kyle. Not this time. Not ever again." My father stared at me, his face turning a mottled purple. For a moment I thought he might hit me right there in the hospital bed. "You will sign it," he growled, leaning over me, his breath smelling of stale coffee and mints. You will sign it or so. Help me God, you are dead to us. We will cut you off completely. No money, no contact, nothing. You will be alone. Ethan, completely alone. I looked him in the eye, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. I am already alone, Dad, I said quietly. I have been alone in that house my whole life. Get out. My father snatched the paper from the tray table, crumbling it in his fist. Fine, he spat. Have it your way. Ruin the family, see if I care, but don't come crawling back to us when you are living on the street. He turned and stormed, and, out of the room, not looking back, my mother lingered for a second, her expression torn between anger and pity. You are making a mistake, Ethan, she said softly. Just sign the paper. Save your brother. Please. I closed my eyes, turning my head away. Get out, Mom. She let out a small sob and followed my father, leaving me in the silence of the hospital room. The pain in my back was throbbing, a relentless reminder of my reality. But beneath the agony there was something else, a strange, cold clarity. They had shown their hand. They had revealed exactly who they were and what I was to them. I was a resource, a pawn, a sacrificial lamb to be used to save their golden child. But they had made a miscalculation. They thought I was weak because I had always taken their abuse. They thought I was trapped because I was broken, but they were wrong. I reached for the call button, my hand hovering over the red plastic device. I wasn't calling the nurse for pain meds. I wasn't calling for water. I was calling to start the war. When the nurse arrived, a young man named David. I looked at him with dry eyes. I need to speak to the police officer who was here yesterday, I said, and I need to speak to a lawyer now. David looked at me, surprised by the intensity in my voice. Is everything okay? No, I said. Nothing is okay, but it is going to be. My parents just tried to coerce me into committing insurance fraud, and I want to report it. As David hurried out to make the call, I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. The physical pain was still there, sharp and terrifying. But the emotional weight, the burden of trying to please people who would never love me, was gone in its place, was a burning, white-hot anger, a fuel that would keep me going when my legs couldn't. My parents wanted a story about an accident. I was going to give them a story. All right, but it wasn't going to be the one they wrote. It was going to be the truth, and it was going to burn their world to the ground. The hospital at 2 a.m. was a different world, a place of shadows and hushed whispers. Where the line between life and death felt thinner than during the day, the hallway lights were dimmed to a low amber glow, and the rhythmic beeping of monitors drifted from open doors like a collective heartbeat. I lay awake staring at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, unable to sleep. The pain in my back had settled into a dull, throbbing ache, a constant reminder of the metal rods now holding my spine together. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the gnawing anxiety in my gut. I kept replaying the conversation with my parents, the ultimatum, the cold look in my father's eyes when he realized I wouldn't comply. I must have dozed off for a moment because I didn't hear the door open. The first sign that I wasn't alone was the smell of stale bourbon and expensive cologne wafting over the antiseptic scent of the hospital room. My eyes snapped open, and there he was. Kyle standing at the foot of my bed, his silhouette dark against the hallway light. He wasn't wearing the mask of the concerned brother anymore. His face was slack with drink and twisted with a resentment that went back decades. You think you are real smart, don't you? He whispered. His voice slurred but venomous, leaning over the bedrail, so his face was inches from mine. I tried to push myself up, but my arms were weak and my lower body was a dead weight. I felt a spike of pure, primal fear. I was trapped, strapped to machines, unable to run, unable to fight. Get out, Kyle. I rasped my throat dry. Get out before I call the nurse. He laughed a low, ugly sound and reached out, grabbing the side of my hospital gown, yanking me forward. Pain exploded in my spine and I gasped, tears springing to my eyes. "You are not calling anyone," he hissed. "You are going to sign those papers, Ethan. You are going to tell everyone it was an accident, and you are going to do it tomorrow morning. Do you hear me? I am not going to jail because you can't take a joke." "It wasn't a joke," I managed to say. "Through the pain, you crippled me." "So what?" he sneered, his grip tightening on my gown. "You were always useless anyway. Look at you, half a man lying in your own filth. You think you are special because you got hurt? You are nothing. Mom and Dad know it, I know it. You are just a drain on us. Sign the papers and maybe Dad will give you enough cash to go rot somewhere comfortable. Don't sign them, and I promise you will wish you had died on that concrete." He raised his hand, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to punch me right in my surgical incision. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, waiting for the blow. "Hey, get your hands off him." The voice was sharp, commanding and familiar. Kyle froze his fist, hovering in the air. I opened my eyes to see Nia standing in the doorway. She was still in her scrubs, her badge catching the light. But her posture was different. Gone. Was the timid wife who walked on eggshells around her husband in her place. Stood an ER nurse on her own turf, a woman who dealt with trauma and violence every single night. Kyle turned slowly, a sneer curling his lip. "Well, look who it is. The Nightingale, you should be at home. Nia not lurking around here like a ghost." "I am working a double shift, Kyle," Nia said, stepping into the room and letting the door click shut behind her. She didn't back down. She walked right up to the bed, putting herself between him and me. "Get away from him now." Kyle laughed again, but it was nervous this time. "You don't tell me what to do. You work for me. Remember, my parents pay for your car, they pay for your house. You are nothing without us." "I am his nurse right now," Nia said, her voice ice cold. "And if you touch a patient in this hospital again, I will have security drag you out in handcuffs, and I will press charges, myself. Do you understand me?" Kyle's face turned purple with rage. He stepped toward her, looming over her, trying to use his size to intimidate her, like he had done 1,000 times before. He grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "You ungrateful little witch," he growled, raising his hand as if to backhand her. "You think you can talk to me like that?" I flinched, expecting the sound of flesh on flesh, but Nia didn't flinch. She moved with a speed and precision I had never seen before. She twisted her body, breaking his grip, then shoved him hard in the chest, caught off balance and drunk. Kyle stumbled backward, crashing into the visitor chair and nearly falling to the floor. "Get out," Nia said, her voice not shouting, but projecting with a terrifying authority. "Get out of this room, get out of this hospital, and if I see you near him again, I will destroy you." Kyle scrambled to regain his footing, looking at his wife with genuine shock. He had never seen her fight back. He muttered something obscene, straightened his jacket, and pointed a shaking finger at me. "This isn't over," he spat. "You sign those papers, or you are dead to us." He stormed out the door, his footsteps heavy and uneven down the hallway. Nia watched him go, immediately went to the door and engaged the lock. Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a long, shaky breath, turning to face me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her hands were steady as she checked my IV lines and smoothed the blanket Kyle had rumpled. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I am so sorry, Ethan. I should have been here sooner." "I am okay," I whispered, still reeling from what I had just witnessed. "Thank you, Nia. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she said, pulling the chair close to my bed and sitting down. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red, dark circles, bruising the skin beneath them. She reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. "I have to show you something," she said quietly. "I have to show you this because I can't live with it anymore, and because you need to know exactly what you're up against." She unlocked the phone and tapped the screen, her hands shaking again. I was in the kitchen when it happened?" She explained, her voice thick with guilt. "I was watching through the window over the sink. I saw Kyle setting up the stunt. I saw him talking to the camera, and I had a bad feeling, so I started recording, just in case he tried something stupid. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know he would go this far." She handed me the phone and I took it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The video was high definition, clear and steady, shot from a slightly elevated angle, looking down at the patio. On the screen, I saw the backyard bathed in afternoon sunlight. The party guests were mingling in the background, oblivious. I saw myself climbing the ladder, looking hesitant and small. I saw my parents watching from their lawn chairs, drinks in hand, looking bored. Then the camera zoomed in on Kyle. He was standing by the stack of foam mats, looking up at me. He waved to his phone camera, winking theatrically. Then he turned to the mats. "Hey guys, watch this," he whispered loudly to his livestream audience. This. Going to be hilarious. Watch how this cripple lands." The audio was crisp, capturing every word. "Watch how this cripple lands." Then with a quick, efficient motion, Kyle grabbed the handles of the bottom mat and yanked the entire stack about 10 feet to the left, leaving only the blue tarp covering the gray concrete. He smoothed the tarp down with his foot, grinning up at me, his face a mask of cruel anticipation. The video continued. I saw myself on the balcony, blindfolded and terrified. I saw Kyle shouting encouragement, telling me it was safe, telling me he would catch me. I saw myself take that breath, stiffen, and fall backward. The impact on the video was even worse than I remembered. The sound was a sickening thud, followed by that terrible crack. The camera shook slightly as Nia gasped, but she kept recording. She captured Kyle's laughter, his celebration, his pointing at my broken body. She captured my parents' annoyance, their refusal to help. She captured the moment I tried to move and failed. Video ended and the screen went black, reflecting my own face, pale and horrified. I handed the phone back to Nia, my hand numb. "He planned it," I whispered, the realization settling in my gut like a stone. "It wasn't a prank, gone wrong. It wasn't an accident. He knew. He knew I would get hurt. He wanted me to get hurt. He called you a cripple before you even jumped," Nia said, tears streaming down her face. "He knew exactly what was going to happen. Ethan, that is not a prank. That is aggravated battery. That is malice." I looked at Nia, seeing her for the first time, not just as my brother's wife, but as a fellow victim, a survivor who had finally had enough. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because he tried to hit me," she said, touching her arm where he had grabbed her. "Because he threatened you. Because I am a nurse and I took an oath to do no harm, and watching them do this to you and doing nothing makes me just as bad as them." She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes. "I am done, Ethan. I am done with him. I am done with your parents. I am filing for divorce. But before I do, I want you to have this. You can use it. You can send him to jail. You can take everything from them." She airdropped the file to my phone, the little ping sound echoing in the quiet room like a gunshot. I looked at the file thumbnail, a tiny image of my brother's smiling face seconds before he destroyed my life. It was the smoking gun. It was the leverage I needed. It was the end of their lies and the beginning of my retribution. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for being brave." Naya stood up, smoothing her scrubs. "You rest now," she said. "I will tell the charge nurse to put a security hold on your room. Nobody gets in without your permission. Not your parents. Not Kyle. Nobody." She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "Get them, Ethan," she said, looking back at me. "Burn it all down." As the lock clicked shut, I lay back in the bed, clutching my phone to my chest. The pain in my back was still there, but it felt different. Now it wasn't just suffering anymore. It was fuel. I had the evidence, I had the witness, and for the first time in my life, I had the power. The game had changed, and my brother had no idea that he had just handed me the weapon that would end him. The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting long striped shadows across the bedsheets. I lay there listening to the hum of the machines and the distant chatter of nurses at the station. The pain in my back was a dull roar now, tamed somewhat by the medication, but the numbness in my legs was a silent, screaming void that refused to be ignored. My family thought they knew me. They thought I was Ethan, the boring data analyst who lived in a small apartment and drove a 5-year-old sedan. They thought I was the safe, predictable brother, the one who barely scraped by while Kyle chased his dreams of stardom. They thought I was weak, dependent, and easily manipulated. They were wrong. I reached for my phone, which had been sitting on the bedside table, charged and waiting. I unlocked it and navigated past the standard social media apps to a secure folder hidden behind a biometric lock. Inside were the real tools of my trade: the trading platforms, the crypto wallets, the offshore accounts that I had been building quietly for the past 4 years. I wasn't just a data analyst. I was a quantitative consultant for some of the biggest fintech firms in the country and a very successful independent trader. I had leveraged my understanding of algorithms to build a fortune that my parents couldn't even comprehend. I looked at the balance on my primary account, the numbers staring back at me crisp and green. 7 figures, enough to buy my parents' house 3 times over, enough to pay for the best spinal surgeons in the world, without begging for insurance handouts. I had kept this secret for a reason. I knew that if my parents or Kyle ever found out about my money, I would become nothing more than a bank account to them. They would have guilted me into paying off Kyle's debts, funding his failed business ventures, and financing their country club lifestyle. I had protected my wealth to protect myself. But now I realized I had been hoarding ammunition for a war I didn't know I was fighting until today. I closed the app and opened my contacts, scrolling down to a name I had saved for emergencies, a name that commanded fear and respect in equal measure: Ms. Holloway. Victoria Holloway was not a family friend or a local attorney. She was a shark, a high-stakes litigator who specialized in personal injury and corporate negligence. I had met her 2 years ago when I consulted on a data breach case for her firm. She had told me then that if I ever needed someone to scorch the earth, I should call her. I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and alert despite the early hour. "Ethan, this is unexpected. Do you have a new algorithm for me?" "No, Victoria," I said, my voice raspy but steady. "I have a case for you. Personal one." I explained the situation briefly: the fall, the paralysis, the cover-up, the attempted coercion into insurance fraud. I didn't embellish. I just gave her the data points because that was the language we both understood. When I finished, there was a silence on the line that felt heavier than the one in the room. "I am coming to you," she said simply. "Don't sign anything. Don't speak to anyone. Send me the location." She arrived 40 minutes later, looking like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine editorial and into the sterile reality of the trauma ward. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my brother's car, and her heels clicked a sharp staccato rhythm on the linoleum floor that announced she was not there to offer thoughts and prayers. She pulled up a chair and sat, crossing her legs elegantly. She looked at the IV lines, the brace around my torso, and finally at my eyes. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel like it," I admitted. She pulled a legal pad from her briefcase. "All right, let's get to work. You said there is video evidence." I handed her Nia's phone, which I had kept hidden under my pillow since the night before. She watched the video in silence, her face impassive. She watched it once, then she watched it again, zooming in on Kyle's hands as he pulled the mat, zooming in on my parents' faces as they sat drinking their wine while I stood on the ledge. When she finally looked up, her eyes were glittering with a cold, predatory light. "This is not an accident," she said. "This is aggravated battery with intent to cause great bodily harm. And your sister-in-law, she is willing to testify." She gave me the video. I said she is done with them. Good. Holloway nodded, making a quick note. Now, let's talk about the parents. Richard and Linda correct? Yes. You said they tried to make you sign a waiver to claim it was an accident for an insurance payout. I told her about the conversation. The threats, the ultimatum about cutting me off if I didn't comply. Holloway tapped. Holloway, her pen against the pad, a tight smile playing on her lips. They are worried about their homeowner's insurance liability. She said they know that because this happened on their property and because they facilitated the stunt by encouraging you to jump. They are liable. But they are thinking small. They are thinking about policy limits and premiums. They have no idea what is actually coming for them. What do you mean? I asked Ethan in the state of Illinois. Homeowners have a duty of care to guests on their property, especially when they are aware of a dangerous condition or activity. Not only did they fail to stop Kyle, they actively encouraged you to participate in a stunt that was inherently dangerous, knowing that alcohol was being consumed on the premises and knowing your brother's history of reckless behavior. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. We are not just going to send Kyle to prison for assault. We are going to sue your parents for negligence, premises, liability, and civil conspiracy. They were the adults in the room. They were the property owners, and they watched their son set a trap and did nothing. They are accomplices. I thought about my father's pride in his house, the estate he had spent his life curating, the symbol of his status. I thought about my mother's obsession with appearances. I don't want their money, I said. I have my own. I know you do, Holloway said. But this isn't about enriching you. This is about punishment in the civil justice system. Money is the only language we have to translate pain into accountability. You want them to understand what they took from you. You have to take what matters to them. And what matters to them is their lifestyle, their status, their assets. Exactly, Holloway said. We sue for medical expenses, past and future. We sue for loss of future earnings. We sue for pain and suffering and emotional distress. Given the severity of your injury, the paralysis, the permanency of it, we are looking at a judgment in the millions. She paused, letting the number sink in. Their insurance policy will cap out quickly. After that, we go after their personal assets, the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, the investments. We will freeze everything pending the outcome of the trial. They won't be able to sell a teaspoon without a judge's permission. I looked out the window at the gray Chicago skyline. I imagined my parents sitting in their beautiful living room right now, probably complaining about how inconvenient my injury was for them, probably worrying about what the neighbors would think. Do it, I said softly. Holloway stopped writing. You are sure this is the nuclear option? Ethan, once we file, there is no going back. Your relationship with them will be over. It was over the moment I hit the concrete. I said it was over when they told me to walk it off. It was over when they chose Kyle's gambling debts over my spine. Burn it down. Victoria, take everything. She nodded, closing the legal pad with a snap that sounded like a gavel. Consider it done. We'll have the papers filed by end of business today. I will also arrange for a private security detail to be stationed outside this room starting immediately. If they try to come back, they will be removed for trespassing and witness intimidation. She stood up, smoothing her jacket. One more thing, Ethan. Since you have the resources, I want you to transfer to a private rehabilitation facility. I know a place in Switzerland that specializes in spinal cord injuries. They have experimental treatments, robotics, things that aren't available here yet. If there is a 1% chance you can walk again, they will find it. I hadn't even thought about that. I had been so focused on the betrayal, on the survival, that I hadn't let myself hope for recovery. Book it, I said. Money is no object. Victoria smiled a genuine smile. This time, I love a client who knows his worth. Get some rest. Ethan, the war starts tomorrow. She walked out of the room. the click of her heels fading down the hallway, leaving me alone again. But the silence in this room felt different now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment, it was the silence of a gathered storm. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app again. I transferred a retainer fee to Holloway's firm, a number that would have made my father choke. Then I looked at the contact for my mother. I didn't block it, not yet. I wanted to see the call come in when the process server knocked on their door. I wanted to see the panic when they realized that the son they had discarded was the one who held the deed to their future. My legs were still numb. My back was still broken, but for the first time since I fell, I felt powerful. They had broken my body, but they had forgotten that I had spent my entire life building a mind that could outthink them and a fortune that could outspend them. They wanted to play games with my life. Fine, we would play. But this time I was setting the rules, and the price of admission was everything they owned. The waiting was the hardest part the room had been staged with the precision of a theater set. Victoria Holloway had arrived an hour early, carrying a small black case that looked innocuous but contained high-fidelity recording equipment. She placed a small microphone behind the plastic flower arrangement on the bedside table and another taped to the underside of the bed frame. She moved with the efficiency of a predator setting a snare, checking the audio levels on her tablet before nodding to me. The plan was simple but dangerous. I had to lure them in. I had to make them feel safe enough to boast, safe enough to show their true colors. I picked up my phone and dialed my father. The number felt heavy under my thumb like a trigger. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with impatience. "Hello, Dad," I said, letting my voice crack, letting the exhaustion and pain bleed into the receiver. "I can't do this anymore. I am tired. I just want it to stop." There was a pause on the line, a beat of calculation before his tone shifted to a smooth, "Practice concern, that is good, son. That is the right decision. We just want this nightmare to be over, too." "I will sign the papers," I whispered. "But I need you to come here, all of you. You, Mom, and Kyle. I need you to bring the papers, and I need us to be a family again before I sign. We will be there in an hour." "Ethan," he said, the relief audible in his voice. "You are doing the right thing." I hung up and looked at Holloway. She was standing by the door to the ensuite bathroom, which connected to the adjacent patient room, where two plainclothes detectives were currently waiting. She gave me a sharp nod, her eyes cold and focused. "Remember," she said, "let them talk. Don't interrupt. Let them dig their own graves, get the admission of prior knowledge, that is the key. Once you have it, press the call button." She stepped into the bathroom, leaving the door cracked a fraction of an inch. I was alone again, left to stare at the ceiling and rehearse my surrender. They arrived exactly 45 minutes later. My father led the way, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, carrying a leather portfolio. My mother followed, clutching a Bible and looking like the picture of maternal suffering. Kyle brought up the rear. He looked sullen, hungover, and visibly nervous, his eyes darting around the room as if he expected a trap. But there was someone else with them, a man I recognized from my childhood. Pastor John from their megachurch. He was a large man with a booming voice and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. My parents had brought him for spiritual leverage, a heavy, blunt object to bludgeon me with forgiveness. "Ethan," my mother cried, rushing to the bedside and taking my hand. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I didn't pull away. I let my hand lie limp in hers, playing the part of the broken, defeated son. "We have been praying for you so hard." I looked at Pastor John. "Why is he here?" "We thought you might need some spiritual guidance," my father said, pulling up a chair, his movements brisk and businesslike. "Making a decision like this, forgiving your brother, it takes a big heart, son. Pastor John is here to witness your act of mercy." "Mercy," I repeated, tasting the word. It tasted like bile. "Let us pray," Pastor John boomed, bowing his head. "Lord, we ask you to soften Ethan's heart, to help him see that anger is a poison and forgiveness is the cure. Help this family heal from this unfortunate accident. Amen, my mother whispered, wiping a dry eye. Kyle stayed by the door, arms crossed. Accident? He muttered. Yeah, right. My father shot him a warning look, then turned his attention back to me. He opened the portfolio and slid a document onto the tray table, along with a heavy, expensive pen. Here it is. Ethan, the waiver of liability, and the statement for the insurance company. It just says that you accept the risks of the activity and that no one is at fault. Once you sign this, we can file the claim and get you the money for your treatments. $300,000. Son, think about what that can do for you. Looked at the paper, the black letters swimming before my eyes. I reached out and touched the pen, but I didn't pick it up. I will sign it, I said, my voice trembling. But first I need to know something. I need to hear it from you. Hear what my father asked, his patience already fraying. I looked at Kyle, then at my mother, then finally at my father. Why, I asked. Why did you let him do it? What are you talking about? Kyle scoffed. I didn't let anyone do anything, you jumped. Shut up, Kyle, I snapped, a flash of my real anger breaking through. I am asking Dad, why did you let him pull the mats? I know you saw him. I saw you looking right at us. My father sighed, leaning back in his chair. He looked at the pastor, then at my mother seeking approval. When he looked back at me, his eyes were cold, flat, and utterly devoid of love. Ethan, we were having a party, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. People were watching, having a good time. Kyle was just trying to be funny, trying to make content. You know how important his channels is to him. So you saw him, I pressed. I need to know. Dad, did you see him pull the safety mats away, leaving only the concrete? My father looked around the room, checking the corners, checking the hall. Paranoid but arrogant. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. Look, we saw him, okay? We saw him move the stack. We thought it was funny. We thought you would fall, land on your ass. Maybe bruise your tailbone, get a few thousand likes on TikTok. Nobody thought you were going to have glass bones and shatter your spine. It was a prank, Ethan. A joke. You took it too seriously, just like you take everything too seriously. The confession hung in the air, toxic and absolute. He admitted it. He admitted he watched his son set a trap that could kill me, and he let it happen for the sake of a few internet views and a laugh. And you, Mom? I asked, turning to her. You saw it too. Linda looked down at her hands, twisting her rings. I thought it would be a funny video, she mumbled. I didn't want you to get hurt. Not really, but you have to understand, Ethan. Kyle needs this. He needs a win. He has been so depressed lately, we just wanted him to be happy. Happy, I said, my voice gaining strength. Happy by paralyzing me. It wasn't supposed to be this bad. Kyle burst out, stepping away from the door, his voice whining and petulant. You just landed wrong. If you had tucked and rolled like a normal person, you would have been fine. You ruined everything, Ethan. Now I can't even post the video because it looks bad. Because it is evidence of a crime, I said. My father slammed his hand on the tray table. Enough of this self-pity. Sign the paper. Ethan, sign it now, and we will transfer $10,000 into your account today. A bonus on top of the insurance money. $10,000 for your trouble to buy some fancy wheelchair or whatever. $10,000. That was the price they put on my legs. That was the value of my future. In their eyes. I looked at the checkbook in his hand, then at the waiver. I can't sign. I can't. This, I said, my voice calm, now cold. My father's face turned purple. What did you say? I said I can't sign this because it is a lie. It wasn't an accident. It was assault, and you are accomplices. You little ungrateful wretch, my mother hissed, her mask of piety dropping completely. We are trying to save you. Save me. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You are trying to save yourselves. My father stood up, looming over me. The threat physical and imminent. You listen to me, you cripple. You will sign this paper or I will make sure you never see a dime. You will rot in a state home, and we will forget you ever existed. Sign it. He grabbed my hand, trying to force the pen into my fingers, trying to physically coerce me into signing away my justice. Now I didn't sign. Instead, I reached out with my free hand and pressed the red call button on the side of the bed, holding it down. The reaction was instantaneous. The door to the ensuite bathroom flew open and Ms. Holloway stepped out, phone in hand, recording every second. She didn't look like a lawyer in that moment. She looked like an executioner. "Get away from my client," she ordered, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. My father froze, dropping my hand. He stared at her, then at the bathroom door. Confused. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "I am his attorney," Holloway said, stepping between us and the family, "but I am not the one you need to worry about." The door to the hallway burst open and the two detectives I had met earlier marched in, followed by two uniformed officers. The room suddenly felt very small and very crowded. Richard Davis. Linda Davis. Kyle. Davis. Detective Miller announced, his hand resting on his service weapon. "You are all under arrest." "For what?" my father shouted, backing away, knocking over the chair. "This is a private family matter." "Not anymore," Miller said. "We heard everything. The recording device in this room captured your confession to conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, witness tampering, and being accessories to aggravated battery. Kyle Davis, you are under arrest for first-degree assault, resulting in great bodily harm." Kyle tried to bolt. He lunged for the door, but the uniformed officer was faster, tackling him to the ground, right next to my bed. Kyle screamed, thrashing and cursing, his face pressed into the linoleum. My mother began to wail, a high-pitched, keening sound that grated on my nerves. She turned to Pastor John, clutching his arm. "Save us! Tell them we are good people!" Pastor John backed away. His hands raised, his face pale. "I think I should go," he stammered. "I cannot be involved in this." "Sit down," Detective Miller barked at him. "You are a witness now, Padre. Nobody leaves." I watched from my bed as the officers handcuffed my father. He struggled, sputtering threats about suing the department, about knowing the mayor, about ruining their careers. But as the cold steel clicked around his wrists, the fight went out of him. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. "You did this," he whispered. "You set us up." "You set yourselves up," I said. My voice steady. "I just turned on the lights." Ms. Holloway moved to the foot of the bed, looking down at my parents with a look of pure professional disdain. "We will be filing a civil suit in the morning," she informed them. "We are seeking damages for medical costs, pain and suffering, and punitive damages for the intentional infliction of emotional distress. We will be freezing your assets immediately, the house, the cars, the accounts, everything." My mother looked at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, ruining the facade. "Ethan, please," she begged. "We are your family." "No," I said, looking at the three people being read their rights. The three people who had viewed my life as disposable. My family is the woman who filmed the truth. My family is the lawyer defending me. My family are the people who care if I live or die. You are just defendants. "Take them away," Detective Miller ordered. The officers hauled them out one by one, Kyle weeping and begging for a deal, my mother sobbing hysterically, my father silent and staring at the floor, a broken man who had gambled everything on the wrong son. As the door closed behind them, leaving the room suddenly quiet, I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. Ms. Holloway looked at me and nodded, a small smile on her lips. "We got them," she said. "We got everything." I looked down at my legs, still motionless, still numb, but for the first time since the fall, I didn't feel paralyzed. I felt powerful. I had lost my ability to walk, but I had found my ability to fight. And as I listened to the fading sirens taking my family to the precinct, I knew that I was finally free. The trap had sprung and the rats were caught. Now it was time to take back what was mine. The courtroom was colder than the hospital room, had been a different kind of chill that settled deep in the marrow of my bones. I sat in my wheelchair next to Miss Holloway at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting on the armrests, trying to stop them from trembling. Not from fear, but from a vibrating frequency of pure adrenaline mixed with rage across the aisle. Sat my family. They looked like a portrait of suburban respectability. My father in a navy suit that cost more than my first year of college. My mother in a modest gray dress with a string of pearls. And Kyle looking young and scared in a button-down shirt and tie, his hair combed neatly to hide the hangover I knew he was nursing. The air in the room was thick with tension, the kind of heaviness that precedes a tornado. The jury, 12 strangers who held my future in their hands, looked tired and skeptical. They had spent the morning listening to the defense attorney, a man named Sterling who had a smile like a used car salesman and a voice like oil-slicked gravel. Try to dismantle my life. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket, and approached the jury box, his movements theatrical. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice smooth and confident. We are here today because of a tragedy. There is no denying that Ethan Davis suffered a terrible injury. But we must ask ourselves who is truly responsible. Is it the loving brother who was simply trying to create a fun memory for his birthday? Or is it the plaintiff himself? A young man with a history of clumsiness, a history of fragility, who perhaps had too much to drink and made a poor judgment call. I gripped the armrests tighter, my knuckles turning white. He was doing exactly what Holloway said he would, painting me as the architect of my own destruction, blaming the victim. Sterling continued, pacing back and forth. Kyle, Davis did not push his brother. He did not force him off that balcony. This was a mutual decision, a game between siblings that went wrong because Ethan failed to land correctly. It is a tragedy. Yes, but it is not a crime, and it certainly is not grounds to destroy the lives of these good parents who only ever wanted the best for their children. He looked over at my parents who dabbed at dry eyes with tissues, playing the part of the grieving, misunderstood guardians perfectly. Ms. Holloway didn't even look up. She just made a note on her legal pad, her face a mask of calm indifference. When it was her turn, she stood up slowly, smoothing her skirt. She didn't pace. She didn't use flowery language. She just walked to the podium and called her first witness. Dr. Bishop took the stand, looking every inch the distinguished surgeon he was. He adjusted his glasses and stated his credentials, his voice projecting authority and absolute certainty. Holloway led him through the events of that night, the surgery, the extent of the damage, the permanence of my paralysis. Dr. Bishop Holloway asked, looking directly at the jury. Can you tell us about your findings regarding Ethan's medical history, specifically regarding the skeletal survey you performed? Sterling objected immediately. Relevance, Your Honor. Goes to establish a pattern of conduct, Your Honor. Holloway shot back, her voice sharp as a whip. Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. Dr. Bishop cleared his throat. He pulled up a series of digital X-rays on the large courtroom monitors, pointing to the ghostly white lines on my ribs, my collarbone, and my spine. These are calcified fractures, Dr. Bishop explained, using a laser pointer to highlight the jagged lines of healed bone, here on the third and fourth ribs, here on the left clavicle, and here a compression fracture in the thoracic spine. These injuries are years old. They healed without proper setting or medical intervention, which means they healed crooked, resulting in chronic pain and weakness. And in your professional opinion, Dr. Holloway asked, what kind of force is required to cause these injuries? Significant blunt force trauma. Dr. Bishop replied, the kind you see in car accidents, or falls from heights, or severe physical assault. These are not the result of a child being clumsy. These are the result of high-impact violence that was ignored and left untreated. A murmur rippled through the jury box. Jurors were leaning forward now, squinting at the screens, looking from the X-rays to my parents. Richard was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. Linda was looking down at her lap, picking at a loose thread on her dress. Sterling tried to cross-examine, tried to suggest I played contact sports, tried to suggest I was a daredevil. But Dr. Bishop shut him down with clinical precision, stating that the nature of the breaks was defensive, consistent with being struck or pushed, not playing football. Then came the moment we had all been waiting for. Ms. Holloway called Nia to the stand. My sister-in-law walked to the witness box with her head held high. She didn't look at Kyle. She didn't look at my parents. She looked only at me and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She looked tired, but her voice was steady as she swore to tell the truth. Ms. Holloway didn't waste time. Nia, you were present at the residence on the day of the incident, correct? Yes, and did? Correct? Yes. You witnessed the events leading up to Ethan's fall. I did. Nia said I was in the kitchen watching through the window. And what did you see? I saw Kyle setting up the stunt. I saw him talking to the camera, and I saw him move the safety mats. The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the scratch of a pen. You saw him move the mats, Holloway repeated. Yes, Nia said, her voice trembling slightly, but gaining volume. He pulled the foam mats away and left only a thin blue tarp over the concrete patio. Did you record this? Yes. Ms. Holloway turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit A into evidence, a video recording taken from the witness's phone at the time of the incident. Sterling jumped up, objecting, citing privacy, citing context, citing anything he could think of to stop that video from being played. But the judge overruled him with a wave of his hand. The lights in the courtroom were dimmed, the large screens flickered to life, and suddenly we were back in that backyard. The sun was shining, the music was playing, and there was Kyle on the screen grinning into the camera. Watch this, he whispered on the video, the audio amplified through the courtroom speakers, clear and damning. This is going to be hilarious. Watch how this cripple lands. A collective gasp went through the room like a physical wave. Jurors covered their mouths. One woman turned away, unable to watch. On the screen, Kyle yanked the mats away, revealing the hard gray concrete beneath. He smoothed the tarp, his face twisted in a cruel, anticipatory smile. Then the camera panned up to me, blindfolded and terrified, standing on the ledge. The video played on, capturing my parents, sitting in their chairs, watching me. Watching Kyle. Watching the trap being set, and doing absolutely nothing. They didn't shout a warning. They didn't stand up. They just sipped their drinks and waited for the show. Then the fall, the sickening crack of my spine, shattering against the cement, echoed through the silent courtroom, loud and violent. It was followed by my scream, a sound of pure agony that made the stenographer flinch. Then Kyle's laughter, pranked look at his face. Oh my God, that was perfect. Holloway paused the video on a freeze frame of Kyle laughing, standing over my broken body, while my parents looked on with expressions of mild annoyance. The lights came back up, the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. It was no longer a trial. It was a reckoning. The jury looked at my family with open revulsion. The judge was staring at Kyle with a look of cold fury. Holloway turned to Nia. One last question. Did anyone in the family attempt to help Ethan after he fell? No, Nia said, wiping a tear from her cheek. His father told him to walk it off. His mother said he was ruining the party. Kyle just kept filming. Thank you. No further questions. Sterling declined to cross-examine. He knew it was over. He sat down, slumping in his chair, distancing himself from his clients. But it wasn't over yet. Kyle was shaking in his seat, his face pale and sweaty. He was whispering frantically to Sterling, grabbing his arm. Sterling tried to push him away to shush him, but Kyle was unraveling before our eyes. The prosecution rested, and it was the defense's turn. Sterling stood up clearly, intending to rest his case and try for a plea deal later. But Kyle stood up too. "I want to testify," Kyle blurted out, his voice cracking. "Sit down," Sterling hissed. "Sit down, you idiot." "No, I am not taking the fall for this alone," Kyle shouted, pushing past his lawyer and stumbling toward the stand. "I want to testify." The judge looked at him, eyebrows raised. "Mr. Davis, I strongly advise you to listen to your counsel." "I don't care about counsel," Kyle yelled. He was panicking, the reality of prison closing in on him like a vice. He looked at the jury, then at me, then finally at our parents, his eyes wide and wild. "They told me to do it." The courtroom erupted. My father jumped to his feet, shouting, "That is a lie. Sit down, Kyle, order them." Judge banged his gavel order in this court. Kyle didn't sit down. He pointed a shaking finger at our parents. It was their idea. They said Ethan was getting too independent. They said he needed to be taken down, a peg. They knew about the mats. Mom said it would be funny. Dad said, "If he got hurt, we could use the insurance money to pay off my bookie." Insurance money. Holloway stood up, her eyes locked on Kyle. "You are saying your parents conspired with you to commit insurance fraud?" "Yes," Kyle screamed, tears streaming down his face. "They owe money. Dad's business is failing. Mom has credit card debt. They said if Ethan got hurt on the property, the liability insurance would pay out huge. They said we could split it. They told me to make sure he got hurt bad enough to get a settlement, but not bad enough to kill him." "You are a liar," my mother shrieked, standing up and losing all her poise. "You are a liar and a failure. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." "You told me to do it," Kyle screamed back, spitting as he spoke. "You stood there and watched you. Said he needed to learn a lesson. You said he was arrogant because he had a job, and I didn't. You wanted his money." I sat in my wheelchair watching them tear each other apart. It was grotesque, and it was beautiful. The perfect family facade had shattered, revealing the rot underneath. They were cannibals, eating their own to survive. The judge was banging his gavel, shouting for order, but nobody was listening. The bailiffs moved in, restraining my father, who was trying to lunge at Kyle. My mother was sobbing hysterically, screaming that her son was crazy, that he was on drugs, that none of it was true. Ms. Holloway leaned down to me, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "We have them," she whispered. "We have everything." Kyle was still shouting as the bailiffs dragged him away from the witness stand, babbling about text messages, about emails, about proof that our parents were the masterminds. The judge finally restored order, his face red with exertion. "I am declaring a recess," he boomed, glaring at the defense table. "Mr. Sterling, control your client or I will hold him in contempt. Bailiffs, take Mr. Davis into custody immediately, pending a review of these new confessions." As Kyle was handcuffed and led away, he looked back at me, his eyes begging for help, begging for the brother he had tormented to save him one last time. I just looked at him, my face blank, and felt nothing. My parents were sitting frozen at their table, shunned even by their own lawyer. The jury was looking at them like they were monsters, which they were. The trial wasn't just about my injury anymore. It was about a conspiracy. It was about fraud. It was about a lifetime of abuse, culminating in a moment of absolute betrayal. My brother had turned on them to save himself, and in doing so, he had handed me the keys to their destruction. As the bailiff wheeled me out of the courtroom for the recess, I looked at my parents one last time. My father had his head in his hands. My mother was staring. At the wall, catatonic, they knew it was over. They knew their assets were gone, their reputation was gone, their freedom was in jeopardy. Ms. Holloway walked beside me, a small, satisfied smile on her lips. "That went well," she said. I looked at her, And for the first time since the accident, I smiled back, a real genuine smile. Yes, I said it did. The MRI had revealed the damage to my spine, but the trial had revealed the damage to their souls, and unlike my back, their condition was incurable. The fall had broken me, but the truth had destroyed them, and as I wheeled down the hallway toward the exit, I knew that while I might never walk again, they would never run free again. Justice had finally arrived, and it wore the face of their own son, betraying them just as they had betrayed me. The gavel sounded like a gunshot echoing through the wood-paneled courtroom, signaling the end of one life and the beginning of a long, dark winter. For my family. The judge, a stern woman who had presided over the trial with a face like granite, looked down at Kyle. Over her spectacles, she did not look at him with pity. She looked at him with the disdain one reserves for something unpleasant, stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "Kyle Davis," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, "you have been found guilty of aggravated battery resulting in great bodily harm and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Your actions were not a prank. They were a calculated assault on your own brother, followed by a cowardly attempt to cover your tracks and profit from his suffering." Kyle was trembling so hard, his chair vibrated against the floor. He looked at our parents, his eyes wide and wet, silently begging them to fix this, like they had fixed everything else in his life. But Richard and Linda were staring at the table, their faces gray and ash, their influence, their money, their connections. "None of it mattered in this room. I sentence you to 8 years in the Illinois State Penitentiary," the judge declared. "You will not be eligible for parole until you have served at least 85% of your sentence. Remand him into custody." "No," Kyle wailed, the sound high and thin like a child. "Mom, Dad, do something." The bailiffs moved in efficiently, pulling his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. My mother let out a strangled sob, burying her face in her hands. My father just closed his eyes, a single tear tracking through the makeup he had worn to look younger for the cameras. The judge wasn't finished. She turned her gaze to my parents. "Richard and Linda Davis, for your roles in this conspiracy, and for your criminal negligence, you are sentenced to 5 years of probation and 5,000 hours of community service. Furthermore, you are now convicted felons, a status that will remain on your permanent record." The criminal trial was over, but the destruction of their world was just beginning. The following week, the civil judgment came down like a hammer. Ms. Holloway had. Ruthless in the damages phase, presenting actuary tables showing the cost of my care for the next 50 years, the lost wages, the modifications needed for my home, the pain and suffering of waking up every day unable to feel my legs. The jury awarded me $3.5 million. It was a staggering sum, a number that made headlines, but the real blow wasn't the amount, it was where the money had to come from. Because Kyle's act was ruled intentional and criminal, and because my parents were found to be co-conspirators, their homeowner's insurance policy invoked the intentional acts exclusion clause. The insurance company wasn't paying a dime. My parents were personally liable for the entire judgment. I sat in my wheelchair at the back of the auction house 2 months later, watching the dismantling of the Davis empire. My father's vintage car collection, the pride of his midlife crisis, was sold off piece by piece. The Porsche went to a tech CEO from Austin. The restored Mustang went to a collector from Detroit. My father wasn't there to see it. His probation officer wouldn't allow him to leave the county. But I was there. I needed to see it. Next came the stocks and the retirement accounts. Ms. Holloway's team had frozen everything immediately after the arrest, ensuring they couldn't hide assets offshore. The liquidation was swift and brutal. 40 years of accumulation, 40 years of climbing the social ladder, wiped out in a series of electronic transfers to my trust account. The final blow was the house. the sprawling Evanston estate where I had grown up, the house where I had been ignored, belittled and finally broken, was seized to satisfy the remainder of the judgment. On the day of the eviction, I parked my new specially modified van across the street. I watched as the movers hired by the bank carried out the furniture, the grand piano. Nobody played the expensive art my mother bought to impress the neighbors, the dining table where I had been told I wasn't good enough. Parents came out last, carrying 2 small boxes of personal items that the court allowed them to keep. They looked small, shrunken. My father wore a tracksuit that had seen better days, his expensive suits sold or in storage. My mother wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, revealing the gray roots she used to meticulously hide. They stood on the sidewalk looking back at the house. It wasn't just a building to them, it was their identity. It was the physical proof that they were better than everyone else. And now it belonged to the bank, and the equity belonged to the son they had discarded. My mother looked across the street and saw my van. The windows were tinted, but she knew I was there. She took a step toward me, her hand raised as if to wave, or perhaps to beg. But my father grabbed her arm. He whispered something to her. His head bowed, and she stopped. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. They walked to their car, a 10-year-old sedan that my father had bought for Kyle years ago, the only vehicle they had left. They loaded their 2 boxes into the trunk. The sound of the trunk latch clicking shut felt like the final period at the end of a long, terrible sentence. I watched them drive away, heading toward the small rental apartment in a rough part of the city that was all they could afford on their Social Security checks. They were stripped of everything, their reputation was in tatters. Their friends had abandoned them. Their golden child was in a cell and their bank accounts were empty. Ms. Holloway sat in the passenger seat beside me, checking her tablet. "The transfer is complete," she said, her voice devoid of sentiment. "The net proceeds from the house sale have been deposited into your account, minus legal fees. You are clear. Ethan, it is all over." I looked at the empty driveway where the ambulance had parked that night, where my life had changed forever. I thought I would feel triumph. I thought I would feel a rush of victory, watching them lose everything, but as I put the van in gear, yow, and drove away, I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, quiet emptiness. The monster that had lived in my closet my whole life, the fear of their judgment, the need for their approval, it was gone. They were just 2 old broke people with criminal records. They couldn't hurt me anymore. They couldn't control me anymore. I looked down at my legs. They were still paralyzed, still heavy and useless, but for the first time in months, they didn't feel like a prison. They felt like a price. I had paid for my freedom. "Let's go," I said to Holloway. "Take me to the airport." She looked at me surprised. "The airport?" "Yes," I said. "I have a flight to Switzerland to catch. I have a lot of work to do, and I don't want to waste another minute thinking about them." As we drove toward the highway, leaving the suburbs behind, I deleted my parents' contact information from my phone. One by one, Richard delete, Linda delete, Kyle delete. With each tap, the weight on my chest lightened. The rearview mirror showed only the road behind me, empty and open. I was broken, yes, but I was rich, I was free, and for the first time in 26 years I was the one steering the wheel. The view from the 45th floor of the downtown Chicago penthouse was breathtaking, a panorama of steel and glass rising against the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. It was a long way up, but for the first time in my life, I didn't fear the fall. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, my weight resting lightly on a sleek carbon fiber cane, the only physical evidence that remained of the day. My spine was shattered. 12 months ago, doctors told me I would never stand again. They said the nerve damage was catastrophic, that the best I could hope for was partial sensation in my upper thighs, but they didn't factor in 2 things: my stubborn refusal to accept their prognosis, and the $3.5 million I had stripped from my parents' assets. The clinic in Zurich had been grueling months of experimental stem cell therapy, robotic exoskeleton training, and physical therapy, that felt more like torture than healing. I had screamed. I had cried. I had bled. But I had walked out of there. I wasn't running marathons yet, and the cane was necessary for balance on bad days. But I was standing on my own 2 feet. Gravity was no longer my enemy. It was just another variable I had conquered. Behind me, the sound of pages turning broke the silence. Nia was sitting at the sprawling mahogany dining table, surrounded by thick medical textbooks and anatomy charts. She looked different now, lighter. The shadows that had lived under her eyes during her marriage to Kyle were gone, replaced by a fierce determination. She wasn't just an ER nurse anymore. She was studying to become a nurse practitioner specializing in spinal trauma, funded entirely by a grant from the trust I had set up for her. She looked up, catching my reflection in the glass. "You are brooding again," she said, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "Stop thinking about the market. The algorithm runs itself." Turned around the cane, making a soft, rhythmic tap against the hardwood floor. "I am not brooding," I said, walking over to pour myself a cup of coffee. "I am just appreciating the view. It looks different when you are standing." "It looks expensive," she laughed, closing her book. Kyle would have hated this apartment. It has too many books and not enough mirrors. We didn't say his name often, but when we did, it no longer carried the weight of fear. Kyle was currently serving year 1 of his 8-year sentence in a medium security facility downstate. According to the lawyer, he had already lost 2 appeals and most of his teeth in a yard fight karma. It turned out was not just a concept, it was a tangible force. I sat down opposite Nia, watching her highlight a passage on neuroplasticity. We had become an odd pair. 2 survivors living in the wreckage of the family we had destroyed to save ourselves. We weren't lovers, but we were more than friends. We were the only 2 people on Earth who knew the full weight of the truth. My phone buzzed on the marble countertop, vibrating with a persistence that annoyed me. I usually kept it on. Do not disturb during trading hours. But I was expecting a call from my partners in Singapore about a new blockchain integration. I picked it up, expecting to see a country code from Asia. Instead, I saw a local number I didn't recognize. I almost sent it to voicemail. But a strange instinct made me swipe right. "Hello," I said, my voice neutral. "Ethan, is that you?" The voice was thin, reedy and trembling. It took me a moment to place it because it sounded nothing like the booming, arrogant baritone I remembered. It was my father, Richard, but stripped of his bluster, his money, and his pride. I didn't say anything. I just held the phone, listening to the background noise, the sound of a bus passing by, the clatter of dishes in what sounded like a cheap diner. "Ethan, please don't hang up," my father said, his voice cracking. "We didn't know who else to call. Your mother is sick. She has an infection, and we don't have insurance. The clinic won't see her without a copay." I looked across the table at Nia. She had stopped studying, watching me with narrowed eyes. She knew. "We are living in a basement apartment on the south side." "Ethan," my father continued, the words tumbling out in a rush of humiliation and desperation. "It has mold. The heat doesn't work half the time. We lost everything, the lawyers took it all. We are eating at food pantries, son. We are your parents." I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest, contrasting with the cold void where my sympathy used to be. "We made mistakes." I know that my father sobbed, a broken sound that would have shattered the old Ethan. But the man standing in the penthouse had a spine of titanium and a heart of ice. "But we are family. Ethan, doesn't that mean anything to you? We are blood. You can't just let us rot out here. Please, just a few $1,000s just to get us back on our feet. We will pay you back. I promise, pay me back. Me back." Thought, pay me back for the childhood you stole. Pay me back for the spine you let your favorite son shatter. Pay me back for the 30 years of being the scapegoat while you worshipped a criminal. I looked at my legs, strong and functioning. I looked at Nia, safe and thriving. I looked at the empire I had built from the ashes of their betrayal. Ethan, say something. Please, we are family. I moved the phone from my ear and looked at the screen. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger required energy. Anger required caring. I felt nothing, just a mild inconvenience that my morning had been interrupted. I pressed the red icon, ending the call. Then I went into the settings, selected the number, and hit block contact, confirming that it would never ring through again. Who was it? Nia asked, though I knew she had guessed. Nobody, I said, setting the phone down face first on the cool marble. Just a spam call asking for money. Nia nodded. A silent understanding passing between us. She opened her book again, returning to her future. I stood up, grabbing my cane, and walked toward the home office where my video conference screen was already blinking with the incoming call from Singapore. My partners were waiting. The market was moving, and I had a life to live. The past was a basement apartment on the south side of Chicago. The future was right here in the penthouse, and the elevator only went up. I adjusted my tie, took a deep breath, and walked into the meeting, leaving the dead weight of my family behind forever, the price of peace and the power of walking away. Ethan's harrowing journey serves as a brutal yet beautiful testament to the necessity of redefining family. The most profound lesson here is that unconditional love is not a birthright guaranteed by blood. It is a privilege earned through respect, protection, and consistent care. For decades, Ethan was conditioned to accept his role as the scapegoat, believing that enduring abuse was the price of admission for his family's limited affection. His story forces us to confront the dangerous reality of toxic loyalty. We learn that true strength isn't about enduring suffering in silence. It is about having the courage to break the cycle. Ethan's transformation required him to accept a painful truth. The people who were supposed to be his safety net were actually the ones cutting the ropes. By prioritizing his own well-being over the facade of family unity, he demonstrated that self-preservation is an act of profound self-respect, not selfishness. Furthermore, the narrative highlights the vital importance of chosen family. When biological bonds rotted away, it was Nia, an outsider by blood, but an insider by shared values, who provided the loyalty Ethan starved for. This teaches us that we have the agency to curate our own support systems. Ultimately, Ethan's victory wasn't the penthouse or the settlement money, it was the peace found in the silence of no contact. It proves that closure doesn't come from an apology we will never receive, but from the firm decision to lock the door, throw away the key, and build a new life on our own terms. Have you ever realized that your safety net was actually a trap? And what was the moment that finally gave you the courage to cut the cord? Share your journey in the comments below.